What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my championship week top 25. The top 25 has changed a lot because rivalry week was chaotic and there were upsets and there was mayhem. There's one new team in the top 25 as well as a lot of shuffling, especially as you go further up my list. And we're going to dive on into everything here in just a little bit. But of course, as I say before every video, please help support the channel in any way you can. If that's simply just kicking back, relaxing, watching this video, I greatly appreciate that. If you're as big of a college football nerd as I am and want to hit that subscribe button and that bell so you know when I upload, I'd appreciate that. If you just simply want to like, comment, share, I'd really appreciate that as well. Or you can give me a follow on any social media, and hopefully soon you'll start to see what else I do outside of YouTube. But wasting no further time, by the way, those handles are at TailgateNate29. Let's dive on in. Let's talk about my updated top 25. Going to try to make this a little bit shorter of a top 25 because I feel like this one, as you get farther along in the season, the top 25 start not to matter as much. And again, this is my personal top 25, so don't really take this as like a here's who I'd put in the college football playoff, things like that. Nope, this is just personally me ranking what I feel are the 25 best teams in the country right now. And there are no honorable mentions this week because I had a really easy time putting together my top 25 this week. Apart from like where teams are placed, I had a really easy time picking out the 25 teams that I want to put here in the poll. And 25, 24, and 23 did not change. Now, Memphis could be the one team that you could look at here and say, hey, Nate, wait a minute. They just beat Tulane this past week. Are you sure you don't really want to reward them for that? Well, I got to thinking, I mean, Illinois still won, Army still won, and to me, there really wasn't a whole lot of place for Memphis to go. I think Tulane's a very talented team. I think Memphis is a very, very talented team, and if you wanted to, I mean, yeah, maybe compared to last week's poll, I did have Memphis at 25. You could probably throw Memphis up there at number 22, something like that, but I think Memphis is an absolutely phenomenal team. Credit to what they did going on the road, winning that game in Tulane, which is not an easy thing to do. Now, the Green Wave are still going to play for American Athletic Championship, but they are going to have to go up against the team that I have at number 24, being the Army Black Knights. And Army, man, that was a really fun game to watch against UTSA, but Army was able to survive. They were able to come out of that game with a win. And Army, not saying they're going to make the college football playoff if they win that game, but the game is at home on their home field for Army against the Tulane Green Wave. And Army has been one of the better stories in college football this season. 10 wins. They can make it 11 with an American Athletic Championship. They can make it 12 if they beat Navy in 2 weeks' time. But Army's playing for a conference championship game. I have never rooted for anything harder in my life. We'll see if Army can take home the American Athletic Championship. And Memphis, they're probably going to get a spot in a pretty darn good bowl game. And another 10-win season for Ryan Silverfield. Yeah, that has to feel pretty darn good there as well. The Illinois Fighting Illini were able to beat Northwestern. They got a little bit of a fight from the Wildcats in that game, but at the end of the day, Illinois and Brett Bielema, what a bounce-back season for them. I know it got a little shaky towards the middle of the road, but towards the end, Altmaier started to play like himself. This Illini defense was stepping up, and Illinois has another 9 wins. Okay, yes, another 9-win season in the program history, but what a bounce-back season it was for Brett Bielema, for this Illini team. They finished much higher than a lot of people, including myself, thought they were going to within the Big Ten standings. I think they proved a couple people wrong here. Luke Altmaier especially had himself quite the year, and Illinois will round out my regular season polls here at number 23. Texas A&M has dropped out of the latest AP poll, and I wouldn't be shocked if the College Football Playoff Committee dropped them out. I think I'd be a little bit surprised, but I wouldn't be absolutely shocked. I think Texas A&M is still one of the 25 best teams in the country, and losing to a team in Texas doesn't really show me that they're not. Now, I don't think Texas A&M played their best game. I definitely think that Texas A&M could have played a whole lot better against Texas this past weekend, but I mean, you really go ahead and you take a look. I think that's more of a credit to what Texas is than what Texas A&M isn't. Because Marcel Reed, yeah, he had himself a fairly rough day, but I think Marcel Reed's a good player. You look at the job that Mike Elko has done with Texas A&M. Yeah, it's 8-4, but this kind of feels like This feels like an 8-4 season where, I mean, you just simply take a look at the Texas A&M resume. That loss against Auburn probably is the one that's going to make you scratch your head a little bit. But the other losses, you lose to Texas, you lose to South Carolina, you lose to Notre Dame. Those are all really losses that you could look at and say, oh, okay, yeah, those are three really, really good teams. Texas A&M, I think, is still one of the 25 best teams in the country. They got some phenomenal talent. I think they played a good brand of football all season long. An 8-4, 5-3 record in the SEC, especially with how chaotic it was this year, I'd say that's pretty darn good. Texas A&M at number 22. Here's a team that was pretty darn good that I thought would surprise a fair bit of people, but I didn't think would surprise people to this level. The Syracuse Orange, welcome into the top 25. I've wanted to put them in this list for so long, just full transparency. I've wanted them to have a spot in the top 25 for quite some time, and now is their time to shine. Kyle McCord tore things up at Syracuse this year. They took advantage of a Miami secondary that is very, very lackluster, and they were able to pull off that win against the Hurricanes in the Dome. What a win it was for Syracuse, because Miami was in front for most of that, and Cam Ward, Damian Martinez, Mark Fletcher, Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, all those offensive weapons were making it really, really hard on Syracuse. But again, this Miami defense, very, very suspect. McCord threw for 380 yards, no picks in that game, 3 touchdowns. He was lighting things up. LaQuint Allen was a phenomenal running back for Syracuse this season. Again, Kyle McCord, I think, proved a lot of people wrong here. A lot of people that gave him a lot of skepticism after he left Columbus, Ohio, after he left Scarlet and Gray, to put on the colors that Syracuse represents, to put on that orange. And he balled out this year. So you got to give credit where credit is due to Kyle McCord. First-year head coach in Fran Brown, you give him a lot of credit there as well. 9-win season for the Syracuse Orange. They're going to go do a phenomenal bowl game. And what a season it was for Syracuse. They're going to round out here in the top 25. You move on into the top 20. UNLV is where, I should say, is the team that I have sitting here at number 20. Pretty simple game for them this past weekend. I'm trying to figure out, yes, against the Nevada Wolfpack. That is right. The rivalry in there within the state of Nevada. You have Nevada versus the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I thought Nevada didn't necessarily play bad. It's just, I mean, UNLV played better, and that rushing attack was lethal. Over 350 yards in that game, 8.6 yards per carry. Are you kidding me? Jaden Thomas, Haj Malik Williams were both phenomenal. They both had over 100 rushing yards in a pair, or I should say a pair of rushing touchdowns between them, one apiece, and UNLV will get a chance to spoil a potential bid to the college football playoff for Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. Colorado is here at number 19, slaughtering Oklahoma State from this past week. And Colorado, yeah, they probably won't make the college football playoff, but they still had themselves a pretty darn good season, right? Shedeur Sanders really, I think, not necessarily elevated as draft stock, but probably showed that he probably is the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2024 going into the NFL draft. Travis Hunter's definitely in contention to win the Heisman Trophy. And what Deion has done, taking a team that was at the bottom of the barrel of college football, a 1-win team, turning them around a little bit last year, already improving that talent level, to taking a team that still has got a lot of issues in line play, or I should say in trench play, and some defensive schematic things. Colorado was phenomenal this year, and you give a lot of credit to what Deion Sanders has done here with this program. BYU is at number 18, and you want to talk about teams that came absolutely out of nowhere. BYU came out of nowhere. Now, albeit the way this season started, ranking 18th and finishing 10-2 is going to feel like a disappointment for BYU fans. Now, overall, you cannot be disappointed with the way that BYU performed this season. They were picked to finish towards the bottom of the Big 12 Conference by a lot of people, including myself. So apologies to Cougar fans on that. They walked out of here with a double-digit win season with a team coming in that had a lot of questions as determined by the national media, and they crushed expectations. Really happy with the way that BYU season turned out. I think you have to be if you are a Cougars fan. The reason I say it might be a little bit of a disappointment is because for most of this season, they were the top dog in the Big 12. They were one of the few undefeated teams left in the country. It looked like they were going to go play for a Big 12 conference championship. It looked like they were going to go play in the college football playoff. And that just quite simply did not end up happening. Now, BYU, still very, very talented team. Probably will end up going to a pretty darn good bowl game. And again, crushing expectations from where they were to start out this season. You give a lot of credit to what Kalani Sitake has been able to do. Always seemingly, the moment you count him out, BYU is a team to watch out for. And they were this year, and I think they'll be a pretty good team to watch in bowl season as well. The Clemson Tigers, they fell here to number 17. Now, they are going to be playing in a conference championship game, and Clemson does still have some pretty good wins on that resume. But now with 3 losses, their only hope to make the college football playoff is to go ahead and win the ACC championship game. And if that happens, you probably are going to shunt one of those higher up at large bid teams out. I'm talking about Alabama, talking about South Carolina, talking about Miami, team that didn't even make the conference championship game. Clemson is going to go get to play SMU, and still, even though they did lose to South Carolina, they have the right to go win a spot in the college football playoff. If that happens, well, the winner of the Big 12 conference championship game will probably end up getting a top 4 bid instead of it being SMU if they were to be able to beat Clemson, and Iowa State's going to be one of those teams playing in the Big 12 conference championship game. Iowa State, especially down the stretch this year, has had a couple games that'll make you scratch your head, a couple games that will really make you say, like, is this team ready for a Big 12 championship? Is this team ready for a college football playoff spot? Iowa State is a team that has shown throughout points this year that they can compete with some really, really good teams. And again, if you are one of the 2 teams left standing at the end of the Big 12 season, you're doing something right by surviving all of the Big 12 chaos. And Iowa State even endured some of it. They lost to Kansas. They lost to Texas Tech. 2 losses they'll look back on and say, man, we probably could have won both of those games. And yeah, they absolutely definitely could have. I mean, they ran into a Kansas team when they got hot, but they absolutely could have beat Texas Tech. Weird weather conditions, bad weather conditions there in that game. Doesn't matter now. Iowa State wins the Big 12 championship game. They are going to get in to the college football playoff. And what a season it would be for Matt Campbell and the Iowa State Cyclones if they were able to get that done. And as you move on in, I'll say to the top 17, you can really start talking about teams that can make the college football playoff. Kind of reshuffled and rethought how I was ranking teams in this area of the poll a little bit. So Ole Miss has dropped 1 spot here to number 15. Ole Miss has been a fairly impressive team this season, but all in all, you go ahead and you take a look at what Ole Miss has done this year. Ole Miss has been a little bit of a confusing team this college football season because you take a look at Ole Miss's overall resume, they are going to have themselves some pretty darn good wins on this resume, but they did struggle a little bit with the Mississippi State team. That was one of the worst teams in Power 4 football this season. They have a loss at home to a Kentucky team that wound up finishing towards the bottom of the standings in the SEC this season. You have a loss on the road to LSU, which I don't think is too bad, but it definitely doesn't look great at this point. You have a win over Georgia. You have a dominating win on the road against Arkansas, but then a loss to Florida. This Ole Miss season just kind of is a little bit of a head scratcher. Still a very talented team. Jackson Dart, that defense that was able to get pressure. I mean, oh my goodness. The defense every year under Lane Kiffin has just continued to take steps up and up and up. But Ole Miss is one of those teams I dropped a little bit because you overall take a look back at their season, and after struggling with a team in Mississippi State that they probably shouldn't have struggled with, they struggled with teams this year that they shouldn't have struggled with. Again, that win on the road against South Carolina, holding the Gamecocks to only 3 points, looks really, really good now. Just kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit. So Ole Miss is down here at number 15. Arizona State is at number 14, much like the Iowa State Cyclones. Everything on the line this upcoming Saturday. They win the Big 12 championship game. They will be getting in to the college football playoff. And Arizona State, what a story. Sam Levitt, Cam Scadaboo, this Arizona State defense, it's been a phenomenal story this year. It was not a very good team at all under Kenny Dillingham last season, and the job that Dillingham has been able to do, that the work that he has put forth and what Arizona State has become this season has been absolutely extraordinary. I love the way that the Sun Devils are playing some football. They might be, besides South Carolina, the hottest team in college football right now, and they are up 1 spot from last week to number 14. They definitely will be jumping on into the top 12 if they make the college football playoff. Miami is right here at number 13, and I mean, 10-win season for Miami. It has to feel like, okay, this is a program that's starting to take steps in the right direction, but this defense cost Miami 2 games. And Mario Cristobal did it again. He found a way to lose a game for Miami, and the clock management at the end of the game against Syracuse just overall was not that great. Now, when I take a look at this Miami Hurricanes season, I still see a pretty darn good season, and it's a very talented team. And they definitely are going to be in the conversation to be getting an at-large bid in the college football playoff, even though they aren't going to be going to their conference championship game. They're going to join that conversation with the two teams ahead of them in my poll, South Carolina and Alabama, with a team below them and Ole Miss, especially if all the favorites went out. There's going to be one at-large spot left, and it's up to the committee to determine who that will be. Miami will be in that conversation. But man, when you take a look at the way the Miami Hurricanes have shaped out this season, it has to feel like a disappointment. Cam Ward has done everything he can to not let this team lose, and the defense continues to find ways to lose Miami games. 10 wins, you have to be happy with a 10-win season, but it will feel like a disappointment to a lot of Miami fans who had some high expectations of going to the college football playoff, and now it looks like those dreams might be shattered. South Carolina, I think, is the hottest team in college football. I think you can make the case for the Arizona State Sun Devils, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to the South Carolina Gamecocks. And look, South Carolina lost a lot of games this year that would have been absolutely huge wins for them. And if they would have won one of those games, you're probably talking about South Carolina in the college football playoff. That game against the LSU Tigers, they win that, you're probably talking about South Carolina above Alabama for that final at-large spot. The loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Big reason why they right now are sitting behind Alabama in my poll is because of that head-to-head matchup. But you have a win over Missouri. You have a win against Texas A&M. You have a win on the road against Vanderbilt, and now a win on the road against the Clemson Tigers. And it would especially help South Carolina's case if Clemson were to now go win the ACC. Doesn't matter that Clemson now has 3 losses. South Carolina's ruined Clemson's hope to get an at-large bid. But now what they can do is they can look back and honestly, it sounds counterintuitive to root for your rival, but South Carolina probably wants to. If Clemson wins the ACC, it is only going to improve their chances to get an at-large bid in the college football playoff. Alabama is sitting right here at number 11. Again, they are above South Carolina because they beat South Carolina on the football field, and that is why I believe that Alabama will be the front runner for that at-large bid. Now, if Clemson were to win the ACC and maybe SMU falls out, then Alabama and South Carolina probably both get a spot there. And again, we can talk about nuances there all in a separate video that probably will be coming out on Friday. But the fact of the matter is, Alabama's got some good wins. They have some questionable losses, but Alabama, to me, the way that you've seen Alabama play at their best and what Alabama can provide, I think they're going to be the front runner to get that at-large spot. And to me, they're at number 11 in my top 25. Let's move on into the top 10. Win and you're in the college football playoff. In fact, for some of these teams, you're already in the college football playoff anyway, even though you don't have a second game. But for Boise State, you win and you cement your spot in the college football playoff. They finally have cracked the top 10. They've been the best group of 5 team all season long. If I were to be casting a Heisman vote, it would go towards Ashton Jeanty of Boise State. I think what he's done this year has been phenomenal. And you take a look at his numbers compared to some of the other numbers of previous running backs that have won the Heisman Trophy, he is exceeding those tenfold. He is a phenomenal talent. Boise State is a phenomenal team. As long as they take care of business against UNLV on Friday, Boise State will be going to the college football playoff. Indiana's in the college football playoff. One loss coming to the Ohio State Buckeyes. They're sitting down right here at number 9. The thing that's going to hold Indiana back, and that will probably wind up seeing Indiana travel on the road for their college football playoff game, is really the one team that they played that you could consider as a good resume boosting win if they would have gotten it, or a true pride and true contending team, was Ohio State and Columbus, and they got ran out of that building. So for the Indiana Hoosiers, yeah, you do have some wins over a Michigan team that just went and beat the Ohio State Buckeyes. You have a win over a Nebraska team that also made a bowl game. You have a win over a Washington team that's also in a bowl game, and a couple other really solid wins, but nothing too great. Nothing that'll make you look at and say, whoa, that is a really, really good win. They have some solid wins. They have some wins over bowl-eligible teams, but it's what's going to hold Indiana back. They went 11-1. They're going to make the college football playoff, especially with all the chaos that has happened around the nation. But again, that is why Indiana is sitting there at number 9. SMU is going to be sitting there at number 8. The conversation gets very interesting with SMU because if you want my opinion, I think they should be in the college football playoff with a win or a loss in the ACC championship game. The committee might not see it that way. If SMU loses that ACC championship game, then they're going to start lumping them in with the Alabamas and the South Carolinas and the Miamis. And oh boy, here we go. The conversation could get really interesting. Could SMU get left out? I think there's a slight chance that SMU does get left out of the college football playoff field. Do I think it's necessarily going to happen? No, but I also wouldn't say it's impossible because if Clemson not well, okay, so I guess since I started the sentence that way, if Clemson goes into Charlotte and embarrasses the SMU Mustangs and puts up 50 on them and blows them out by 30 plus, I think there's a real risk of SMU missing out on the college football playoff. They do have some pretty darn good wins. They've been a really good team all season long. And quite simply put, you win the ACC championship game, well, you're going to have a shot to go win a national championship, and they will be getting a first-round bye there as well. Tennessee and Ohio State, I think, is the most interesting conversation you could have as far as the college football playoff goes right now. When you compare the two resumes, you compare the two teams, Tennessee's got some really good wins. They have a win over the Alabama Crimson Tide. They are going to have a win over some other really, really, really good teams. I'm pulling up their resume right now, so forgive me for that. But again, Tennessee is going to have a win over the Alabama Crimson Tide. They do have a loss to Georgia. They're going to have a win on the road against Vandy. They got some other fairly impressive wins. But besides that win against Bama, Tennessee's resume, I don't think stacks up to Ohio State because they beat on the road a Penn State team that's now going to be playing for a Big Ten championship. They beat an Indiana team that's going to make the college football playoff. But that's the interesting conversation to have. Whose resume stacks up more? Because that more likely than not, Ohio State and Tennessee is going to end up being a first-round college football playoff game. What the committee has to decide is the game going to be in Knoxville or is the game going to be in Columbus, Ohio? Both of these teams have questionable losses. Tennessee went on the road and lost to Arkansas. Ohio State has that loss at home to the Michigan Wolverines. Ohio State, at the end of the day, I think is overall the more rounded, more talented team. I think their resume is a little bit better. That's why I have Ohio State over Tennessee for that 6th spot, and Tennessee will remain stand pat at 7th. Tennessee started out slow against Vanderbilt, but they did win that game, so that doesn't necessarily hurt their cause at all. It does help them a little bit, actually, because Vanderbilt, pretty darn solid team this year, and on the road win in the SEC, the committee's going to look at it and say, yes, wow. Ohio State doesn't have a Power 4 non-conference team that they played. Tennessee does. They played NC State, but NC State didn't fare to be that good of a football team this season. So, that I think is the most interesting conversation that you could have with the college football playoff field right now, because more likely than not, that is going to be a first-round college football playoff game. It just so happens to depend where it's going to be held. I think if you look at resumes and strength of schedule and everything like that, maybe Tennessee is higher strength of schedule. Maybe it's Ohio State. I'm not too sure of the metrics on that, but Ohio State has played 3 top 10 teams. Tennessee has played 2, and they lost to one of them. Ohio State also lost to one of them, but they beat the other 2. Tennessee or I say not even top 10 teams. Tennessee played 1 top 10 team and they lost. So maybe that helps Ohio State's case in that. Again, I'm just kind of disputing the numbers here, but Ohio State looked awful in the game against Michigan. There is absolutely no other way to say that. Chip Kelly picked a bad day to call the worst game of his career for a team that's national championship or bust. If Ryan Day doesn't get it done, maybe we see the Dayster leave Columbus, Ohio. But for Tennessee, 10-win season. Yeah, you're not playing an SEC championship game, but that honestly probably helps them in more ways than that. Obviously, you want to go win an SEC championship, but the Tennessee Volunteers took care of business. They're going to be in the college football playoff, likely matching up with that team from Columbus, Ohio. Top 5 is really easy. Georgia slides on in there at number 5. Notre Dame will move up to number 4. Penn State at 3. Texas at 2. And Oregon stays at 1. Oregon and Penn State will match up for the Big Ten championship game. They both took care of business handedly this week. Oregon demolished Washington, and Penn State beat the ever-living brakes out of Maryland. Texas, pretty hotly competitive game with Texas A&M, and it's a 10-point spread on the scoreboard. but Texas really did control most of that game. Texas A&M could not do anything offensively against that Texas defense. The Texas offense, yeah, probably could have played a little bit better, but that was a game that Texas controlled pretty much the entire way through. And then Georgia, they've been a really confusing team to figure out this season, but we know that when Georgia plays at their best, they are going we all know that when Georgia plays at their best, they're a team that can go win a national championship. More immediately, though, they're a team that can go win an SEC championship, and they're going to try to do that against the Texas Longhorns and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. You took care of business against USC. Yes, you have a really bad loss against Northern Illinois, but with the way the rest of the nation is shaping out, congratulations, Fighting Irish. You are going to be in the college football playoff. More likely than not, in fact, almost with 100% certainty, I'll say you will be hosting a first round college football playoff game. But that's going to do it for my top 25. Let me know what you would change, what you would fix. Anything else, leave that in the comment section down below, and as well as your own personal top 25. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and see all of you possibly later today, probably later today, definitely later today, with some conference championship predictions. Goodbye.